Hello. Welcome to the Easter egg special of the F1 Failcast. It is your beautiful hosts, Mr. Smithy himself. Alongside me is definitely Zero, Mr. Esther Ben. How you doing?
Greetings, humans. Merry Easter, one and all. Long weekend. Two days off work, both sides of the weekend. Thanks, Jesus. Cheers.
I know. What better way to celebrate religion than to get absolutely sloshed for 4 days?
I'm on the Red Bull Cola, actually.
Ooh.
Even though, as you pointed out in the pre-show, that drinking and driving worked spectacularly for me last time.
Yeah, it really did. So I've kind of taken a little bit of that on board, and I've got myself some mango and peach cider. God knows what that's going to be like. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
So we are having a Classic Cars special episode for the Easter weekend. A bit of something new. Also, maybe a factor is that we've burnt through our season before the actual season has begun. So it's the Easter special padding edition. However, we are running Australia so that we can have a discussion. I say to short qualifying, and don't want that. We want full qualifying.
We do.
Not messing around here. Right, there we go. So we can actually talk about the Australian Grand Prix start of the season. We've got a lot of news to drop as well.
We have. We've got tons of news. A couple of people popping into the chat, so that's good to see. Thanks, John and Zhao. So thank you very much for joining us.
You have picked the 96 Williams.
I have.
The B model.
Yes.
And I will be taking the 95 Ferrari 412 T2. I'm actually a big fan of the 95 Ferrari.
I think it was a very sexy Ferrari.
It didn't do very well, as I recall, but...
No, it didn't. But for me, that was during the Lacey Berger heyday of 90 Ferraridom for me. They were almost as inseparable as Hakkinen and Coulthard.
Yeah, everyone's favourite crime-fighting duo.
Exactly. And talking of Mika Hakkinen, I was rather disturbed to see on Instagram he was in a car with Nico Rosberg doing some kind of weird testing thing for, I think it was some Mercedes new road car. And I thought, what an interesting in-car banter would be there.
Yeah, I'd like to be a fly on that window.
Ooh. I forget that the steering wheel isn't quite as swish as before.
Yeah. Back in time a little bit here. I'm going to try, see if my setups have carried over. I'm going to try a setup I developed for a 2018 McLaren.
That can't go well, surely.
Do I want the low downforce or the mid downforce edition? Let's go mid downforce.
Mind you,
because I think these cars could be a little squirmy on low downforce. Oh, look, we've got the D compound tyre.
The D? Oh,
D for dry.
I was going to make
that removes some tyre strategy out of it. Like, boo on you, Codemasters.
You can't even do your alternative strategies.
No, I can't do an alternative timeline strategy.
Never mind.
Right then. Well, we have much to discuss. There's actually a lot of news as well, but we'll try and see if we can work it in to the race review and everything.
Yep.
We should start with. Well, we never normally talk about practice, but I just want to touch on it very, very briefly because practice was quite interesting for me in that it seemed to actually reflect pace. Which the last few years hasn't necessarily been the case.
No.
So that's just a side comment on that. We should really get into qualifying because no one wants a review of practice. That would just be mental. First of all, what did you think? Did you enjoy the first competitive session of the year?
I did actually, mainly because it seemed to. I was still so very unsure as to what the pecking order was until that session, because I couldn't quite tell if some people were sandbagging or others weren't, and so on and so forth. And actually, as things kind of went on, it was relatively... Oh, I think this is you coming past, so I'm just going to let you go. Oh, it's not you at all. Oh, it's another Williams.
It's hard to tell because all the cars look the same.
Yeah, it was because it was a yellow dot. I was confused. Oh no, I see you as a blue one. What was I going to say? Yeah, for me, it was all about is there going to be anyone to go up against Mercedes? Were Ferrari really that struggly? Were Haas that good? How was McLaren? Were Toro Rosso actually not at the back? And quite a lot of that was answered quite comprehensively. And Melbourne is always an interesting one anyway, because it's quite an individual circuit. So I was impressed, and I was also pleased that the field was relatively tightly together in terms of times once you take away the top three.
Yeah, actually, the midfield is incredibly tight this year, which always makes me happy. I'd rather the whole field was a bit tighter as well, but I wasn't so naive as to dare dream that could be possible. Mm-hmm. That said, I don't feel like some questions have been answered as comprehensively as you might think by the first round. But as we go through the review, I will drop my controversial hot takes upon thee with great justice as the episode progresses.
Say it like you mean it, and therefore it's fact.
Exactly. If you believe something to be true, then it is true.
Flat Earth.
So, for me, the interesting thing in like the first session anyway, that I found that extended throughout the entire weekend was that it didn't. Something felt weird watching it, and eventually I put my finger on part of it being the graphics package.
With its not very readable font.
It is not very readable. I'm not a huge fan of it. Like the pop-up bars at the bottom as well that show you who you're watching. The way they've got like the team logo without the name, the driver's picture, the driver's number in a stylized style, and and then it's got the driver's flag, and you sort of think, well, what, why? It just doesn't look very. It's not very viewer friendly. I also found that the quality tracker on the side of the screen as well, I found that a little bit difficult to read. But also, I was watching a low-resolution illegal stream because Formula One streaming service isn't ready yet.
Shock.
Shock horror, yeah. It's almost as if you can't deliver a product like that in like 3 months.
Never.
Although they do say they're rolling out beta testing in the early part of the season, so some people saw something, I believe.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
But they need to hurry up.
Well, I'll have to think of it, and I'll stick it in the comments afterwards. But there's a Twitter account where someone from the inside of FOM... Oh, it's called Inside FOM, I think it is. But it's all like unofficial, and they're showing you the A/B prototypes of all the different graphics, and putting out things saying, "Does this look better? Does this look better?" And it was really interesting to see that everyone was going, "Last year's font was better. Last year's font was better. I don't like this italic and that kind of stuff." So I expect it to look really, really differently this time next race, hopefully.
I mean, that's one of the good things about Liberty taking over is that they're actually responsive, and I think they're going to have their finger on the pulse of the fans a lot more than Bernie ever did. The only problem with that is that the fans are,
twats,
as we discuss from time to time, not always the right people to ask. Actually,
yeah.
Which sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes you've got to be a leader when you lead a business, and you've got to like make decisions and stay true to your vision a little bit. But I certainly think F1 could use more of this engagement with the fans to at least gauge opinion before making decisions. And so, yeah, I'm encouraged by their ownership of the sport. I think things will go in a generally positive direction as a result of it. But yeah, I think they dropped the ball on TV coverage as a whole, actually.
Yeah, it seemed to be a bit wonky on the whole direction of where it was looking and what it wanted to actually focus on, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I liked that was new for this year was the Will Buxton stuff that they put up on YouTube.
Yeah, which is what he used to do for NBC. And it just seems like F1 have gone, we'll have that show. But yeah, it was interesting. What I will say about Will Buxton, I actually really, really like the guy. But if you want a drinking game, please, please, please do a shot every time he uses the word phenomenal.
I guess you probably run out of superlatives, though, when you commentate on a sport for an extended period of time. Anyway, we said we'd review qualifying, and I ended up reviewing the TV graphics. Let's get down into it. So we'll go front to back. I think that makes sense. Lewis sticking it on pole by 0.6 or more.
Ominous.
That was the moment my heart sank a little bit, to be honest. Yeah. I kind of expected coming into qualifying that we might see something a bit like we saw last year, which was Ferrari had been underplaying themselves a little bit, and actually the gap was narrow. Although I actually thought maybe Red Bull would pull the rug out from that and be the second team, but that wasn't to be either. But it has led to calls for party mode, as it's called, to be banned. That the particularly Red Bull are saying, well, special qualifying modes for the engine, that's what's killing the sport, because their assertion is that while the Mercedes is the best power unit in a race, it's reined in and tempered somewhat by the fact that you only get 3 units for the year.
Yeah. So
they're not actually running the full advantage that they've got. But in qualifying, they have that option to sort of unleash the engine, and I'm kind of torn on that as a solution, because part of me thinks, well, yeah, they're doing that, but they're also taking the hit in terms of longevity of the power unit, which is kind of why it's there, right? But by the same measure, I kind of see Red Bull's point that, well, it is sort of entrenching them in a unassailable position at the front of the grid. But then also, that's what F1's always been about, right? That they've done such a good job that, they can turn the engine up and pull out a 6/10 lead. So I don't know, the jury's still out for me on whether party mode should be banned, but regardless of that, it was a hell of a lap. And it did seem to come out of nowhere, not entirely. I mean, I did expect him to take pole, but to do so by such a margin, it kind of gave me pause for thought a little bit.
Yeah, and I think also it goes to show Lewis's ability to do a one lap, obviously out from nowhere, and kind of wipe the floor with Monsieur Bottas, who didn't really look massively on his pace all weekend. And when he saw that and freaked out and was like, I need to be able to match that kind of pace, bunged it in the wall.
Yeah, I was moving on to him. Bottas bins it into the wall, start of Q3. Yeah, broadcast. I'd love to stick the boot into poor old Bottas at this point, but I'm not going to, because even the greats bin it in qualifying occasionally. It was just unfortunate for me. He caught the inside of that curb, lost it, and I'm going to get into this more later on, but the cars in general look very squirmy, but there's a few in particular that the rear end was breaking away all the way through the Grand Prix as well, and Mercedes is one of those. And I don't lay blame for it entirely at Bottas's feet, to be honest.
No, and that's actually, that observation was something that I didn't expect to see so much of throughout the whole grid, really, was just how nervous and wobbly the cars looked.
because it made Sauber look really bad in practice because Sauber were getting it in practice where the other teams maybe looked a little more grounded. But when you saw not only Sauber's race pace, I think their quali pace is weak, but
Yeah.
their race pace isn't a million miles away from the people around them. And the fact that all the cars, to some extent, were having it. And weirdly, I think the Haas was one of the ones that looked most stable. But, seeing particularly Max losing the rear quite a bit, but Lewis as well, all the way through the Grand Prix, I saw that car looking like it wanted to throw him into the barrier. I don't really want to stick the boot into Bottas too much. I also don't want to stick it into him too much for his race pace, but we'll get onto that later on. So moving onwards, Kimi Räikkönen taking second on the Gridaroni. Impressive. I'm going to talk more about this in the race because I felt a bit sorry for Kimi during the race, but in practice and in quali, he seemed to have the measure of Vettel, which also surprised me because I thought it was going to be going out with a whimper rather than a bang for Kimi this year. But it seems the front end of the car suits him particularly well, and there's always been that thing about Kimi, that his engineers and all the teams he's driven for have said he's very particular about the behaviour of the front end, and it just seems that this Ferrari is in that sweet spot for him that enables him to deliver. I thought his qualifying performance in general was very good, and he seems more switched on this season. And I don't know if that's because he knows in his heart it's his last season, but he seems more engaged somehow.
I know what you mean. Even with like the public relations side of stuff, he seems a little bit more with it and turned on and wanting to engage a bit more and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's I think for me, it wasn't also just that, and we'll get onto it when we talk about the race. But it was the turn 3 down on lap 1, having a go straight away and being like getting stuck in, because Kimi over the last few years has earned the reputation of basically being the safe hands that will get you that 3rd and 4th place. But it's the first time in a while I've seen him where he looked hungry for first, as well as displaying the pace to be able to do it.
Yeah, and I actually I was actually encouraged to see him, and again, I don't want to talk about the race too much because we've got to talk about it later, but in the race he didn't seem to switch off.
No.
And that's new, given how he's been the last 2 seasons. So I found that generally encouraging. I think the Ferrari is much better on race pace than it is on quali pace. And if I was in charge of Ferrari, I'd prefer it to be that way round as well, frankly. But the qualifying deficit does have to be worrying for them. And whether Kimi would have locked out the front row, the second front row position, had Bottas completed Q3, I think we could debate about all day, because clearly the Mercedes hadn't run this party mode on the engine until Q3. But I kind of get the feeling that he might have done.
Yeah.
I still think he would have probably picked Bottas. I mean, he had the number of Bottas all the way through practice. Again, not representative, but I get the feeling that that we still would have had a Lewis-Kimi front row. Whether Kimi has the stamina throughout the season to keep this up, and whether it's going to work out like that at every track, I don't know. But I am somewhat tantalised by the idea of him being up there and maybe winning a race or two. Not least because I think he's probably going to be up for retirement, but I'm just tired of smug arseholes being the ones, putting their digit up to the camera. Because, I mean, like 2014 or 2015, whichever it was Vettel's first year at Ferrari. I forget now. I'm getting 15. Old. But, when the last few years, when Sebastian's won a race, he's kind of been a bit more likeable than when he was at Red Bull. But he's got to the point now where he's fucking insufferable as well. And the big song and dance he made in Australia about getting that win just drove me up the wall. And I was thinking, Jesus Christ, I hope Kimi gets some wins this year. But yeah, Vettel in qualifying. Any thoughts particularly on that young gentleman?
I'm a bit not miffed, but he just didn't look comfy at all during the weekend. Obviously until it mattered, but even then, because it was a strategy rather than anything else, he looked flustered, and I couldn't quite tell if it was just the car not to his liking, or if he knew that the pace wasn't necessarily there over one lap and was therefore pushing over the limit, as Vettel sometimes does. And I couldn't quite tell what it was.
No, me neither. I again, I agree with you. I'm going to shut up because I keep going into talking about the race, but I agree with your statement that he didn't look confident and he didn't look quite like everything's in place. It gave me reason to, which is weird. It gave me reason to sort of think that maybe he won't quite be as sharp as we've come to expect, based particularly on last year, where I thought that was one of his stronger seasons, given that he wasn't in a dominant car. I would argue that it was one of his best seasons, until he fucked it all up from Singapore onwards. But, before then, he was doing all right. Moving down, we had the Haas's.
We did.
Out of the nightmares of Force India, taking the next positions on the grid, proving us wrong. Yeah, that's the first prediction in a while that we've got very badly wrong. It's hard to really criticise too much. The car looks stable, if unspectacular. I stand by my comments from the pre-season episode that I think the car looks overly simplistic, but apparently that works.
Yeah, and I think that's why it might not be showing so many of the awkward setups originally, and especially early on in the season. If you get something that hits the ground running and is simple, then they can capitalise early on. It's what Toro Rosso have done traditionally for seasons on end. They're not doing it now, obviously, but whether they can maintain the pace over the season is another matter, but pleasantly surprised. And actually, speaking to some people that work at Haas, they were just as surprised as the rest of us, because they just assumed that they were going to actually slot in back end of the top 10, and actually others were going to overtake them by the time they got to Melbourne. And when it wasn't the case, they were pretty ecstatic as well.
Yeah, I mean, understandably so. And, like I said on Twitter, I was like, I'm not unhappy about having to eat humble pie on this and say, okay, I got it wrong. But I also, by that measure, still say that I'm concerned about their business model delivering these results. But we'll talk about that in the race. Generally impressive. And it's hard to know, to be honest, because I felt that Haas's pace was qualifying pace more than race pace, and we'll discuss that later on as well, why I believe that. But it did seem like it's a qualifying car rather than a race car. And again, that's
really?
not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. I will explain why once we get into the race review.
Okay.
But it's definitely a good qualifier, and I'm curious as to whether they can keep it up, because they've not been great developers historically, and it's hard to know at this point because the car looks so planted, and we know how much speed and time you'd lose by the rear end breaking away. Mm-hmm. The fact that theirs doesn't so much and seems quite stable, I'm just wondering how much is actual pace and how much is the other teams not having the best coming out of their chassis just yet. And I'm curious about how they develop the car and whether they can hold on to this pace. obviously it's triggered Force India in particular, but other teams as well have come forward now. Sauber, incidentally, have stayed quiet on it. Wonder why that is.
No.
But yeah, there's been a few teams come forward now and say like we need to look into this because that car is way too visually comparable to last year's Ferrari. And I was having a conversation with Callum about this on Twitter, and he made the point that, well, we don't know if Haas will keep up in the development race, and historically they haven't, but also, is it really necessary to investigate them? And I said, well, to be honest with you, if I was someone like Force India, it would at least get me to ask, like, can we take a look? Because Bob Fernley said outright, I don't have any proof that there's anything wrong. It's just unprecedented.
Well, Callum has put in the chat, let Haas be good.
No, I refuse. That it is unprecedented. No team has come into the sport and got into that position. Again, it's only been one race, so we'll reserve full judgment. But no team has.
See, now I disagree. I disagree. Haas Stewart Grand Prix in their third season was knocking on the doors and doing well, with Barrichello at least. I don't think it's unreasonable for them to be where they should be. I guess, like, the flow of information between teams and back and forth. Yeah, you can buy half the car, but you still have to do your own bits and bobs. And when, oh Christ, don't ride the curb, Smith. When I don't know how you could ever control some of that so that you can then not have them reproduce a mini Ferrari, because as soon as someone's outside the circuit and you're in a pub somewhere, of course you're going to start flowing information back and forth, and then it's so. Well, it's one of those things that's difficult to ever put like a cap on and go, that's where the business deal stops, because it just never happened.
Well, I mean, their assertion is the sharing of wind tunnel data, which is explicitly forbidden. Like the rules state that you can share a wind tunnel, but you have to have completely different staff operating it, and there can be no exchange of information. And I guess their implication is that there was some exchange of information. I mean, I don't take... let's be clear on this, because I try and be as fair as I possibly can be. I don't necessarily think Haas have copied Ferrari through anything other than legitimate means, right? My argument for that would be, look at the suspension arms on the Sauber. Those are a evolution of a concept that Toro Rosso and Mercedes have been running. Now, obviously, they've looked at those cars on track, seen what they were trying to do, and come up with their own solution for it, and that is what Formula One is. Like when Adrian Newey went to Leighton House and came up with the idea of a V-shaped underside to the monocoque, then all of a sudden that became the de facto standard once other teams saw it and understood what he was trying to do. So, again, I'm not totally surprised that they produced a car that looks a bit like the Ferrari, because, what, last year's Ferrari was good. And they share suspension components, so, there's going to be an element of that. That said, the reason I'm concerned about this is that because Dallara is producing the bespoke parts for them, and because the rest is coming from Ferrari, when you run a team like Williams or Force India, you are maintaining these massive overheads and staff costs to be a full constructor, and you're going to come out of this season with less prize money than someone who's buying parts off the shelf. And I failed to see where the incentive comes in to be a real constructor. And the problem is, once you move away from that, once you move to the Haas model, it's very hard, particularly for Williams, to convince your shareholders to move back.
Yeah.
And the only legitimate case you could make is, well, we'll never win a championship. It'll develop into a two-tier Formula One. But if you say, well, winning the second tier of Formula One provides more money than coming at the bottom of a single tier formula, then it's hard to make the business case not to fire all your engineering staff and just buy everything from, Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull.
Oh yeah.
And it's good for Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull because they get the benefit of cost reductions by building in not in bulk necessarily, but they produce more chassis. The cost per production of each component comes down, and they're making profit.
Mm-hmm.
But is that the sport we want to see? And I would argue no.
No. And from that standpoint, I completely agree with where you're coming from.
And this is the root of it, because a lot of people have said that I'm anti-Haas, and it's not that I'm anti-Haas. I'm anti the Haas model.
Yeah.
And I don't have ill will towards them or their staff. I don't want to see their cars blow up and catch fire or whatever. I just don't like them putting pressure on other teams on the grid who are abiding by the traditional definition of what it is to be a constructor.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree.
And, given Force India in particular, how they've fallen backwards from the position they've held the last 2 years quite spectacularly, and I don't know if they can get back up there. I'd be looking at Haas and saying, well, anything we can do to clip their wings a little bit is possibly going to pay out in actual dollars at the end of the year. And you have to at least ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
But the one good thing, well, not the one good thing, but the main good thing to come out from this, I think, is that it shuts up all the people who've been saying that K-Mags and Romain Grosjean are crap drivers, which is something you and I have been ardently campaigning against for the last few years.
Yeah.
That actually, no, both of them are really good drivers. It's just, you work with the machinery and setup that you've got. And, Alonso wasn't winning when he drove for Minardi. Doesn't mean he's not Fernando Alonso. And so I think it's good for them. It gives them a chance to go out in qualifying and turn a few heads and build their personal stock up. Because I've got to think that the Haas-Grosjean relationship is probably wearing a little thin at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Ivan Arsenal has just popped in. I think they're best at average. Grosjean got schooled by Kimi. I disagree with that, actually. I think
I would too, actually.
Quite evenly matched. And especially now that as Grosjean has grown over time, I'd say that actually that's less of a thingy bob now. I don't know if you've got this, but have you got the driver in first positions done a time of 36 seconds?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Patch day today, wasn't it?
Yeah, I got the patch the other day, but apparently it wasn't doing anything around. What was I going to say? It was all around esporty stuff, so it wasn't actually supposed to do anything to the game. So God knows what they were doing.
Well, now he's set a lap time of 32 seconds.
No,
I completely lost it there. Was that you I cut in front of there?
No, I'm not on the track at the minute.
Oh, yeah, I completely fucking ballsed it. I was looking at the timing board and missed my breaking point. Yeah, it's... I don't know. Part of me is kind of happy for them, but part of me is concerned about their implication on the sport. I just think it's dangerous to reward a less than full entry too much.
No, agreed.
Moving down, on pace, Carlos Sainz was next down the road, although for whatever reason he started further down. I remember being surprised. I didn't actually hear why he took some sort of penalty. Oh no, it's the Red Bulls. Fucking idiot. We've missed the Red Bulls.
Yeah, they were there.
Yeah, the Red Bulls were also there. Let's talk Red Bull and then we'll get on to Renault and Sainz. unsurprisingly, it seems that Max has Ricardo's number thus far. I don't think that shocks anybody in particular. I want to talk more about Max, particularly during the race review segment, but I thought that Red Bull would look more dangerous in Q3 than they did, and they really didn't. That surprised me because in Q2 Max was looking pretty sharp, as I recall. Or was it Q1? I don't know. At one point he was running at the sharp end. And I thought, okay, well maybe they can pull out a surprise here and you know, show us something that we weren't expecting, but it didn't actually come to pass. And in Q3 I thought they didn't necessarily look toothless, but I was hoping for maybe a little bit more. I've got no particular complaint about the car though, looking at it. Like seeing it on track when they're actually pushing and stuff. I think, you know, Max looked a bit scrappy, but we'll get onto that.
Mm-hmm.
I still sort of think the car looks generally quite good. Now, their implication is that, well, they're losing a lot of pace through the engine, which I think, if I were you, I'd really hold my fucking tongue about bashing that Renault engine.
Yep, especially when you've got a Honda in your back pocket for next year.
You are this far, like a bee's tadger away from having to stick a Renault in the back of your car. Yeah. I would just shut up at this point.
Yeah.
Because also before they turned the wheel competitively, Max had made a comment saying, well, you'll see in qualifying that the Renault is just holding us back on the straights, and actually the car is really good. And it's like, McLaren were dealing that card for the last 2 seasons, and we saw that wasn't quite as they were describing it. So I'd be very careful about making that assertion.
Mm-hmm.
I had hoped to see Daniel be a little bit more engaged in quali. I get the feeling, like I did last year, that he was okay, but
he beat Verstappen, didn't he?
No,
I thought he did.
Not in quali, no.
Oh.
And he got a grid penalty on top of it.
Yeah, he got the weird grid penalty. I'm thinking 5-place grid drop. It was only 3, wasn't it? Sorry, my fault.
Yeah. He got his grid penalty. But it seemed to me that the gap between them in quali was a little too big for my taste. That said, you know, it's he's got the car. It's up to him to deliver, and if he wasn't able to do it, then he wasn't able to do it. I really want to see him do well this season, not just because it's a crucial year for him, but I think if Red Bull are going to take that final step forward, they need both their drivers pushing equally hard and not sort of looking over the garage at each other, figuring out who's got what written into their contract. I think I would have liked to have seen them try and tie Daniel into a contract the same time they did Max. That would have been the smart thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I'm hoping to see over the course of the year that actually the qualifying battle between them is a little more even. But it did look... I didn't have any doubt watching quali that Max would come out ahead on raw pace. So again, no major surprises. You're not through yet.
I see. I'm showing second in mine, and you're not showing through.
We have a bug. Fantastic. I am third.
I'm second in
on
mine.
My screen, and you are 12th.
Well, I show second, and
what is going on?
I've got someone disqualified as well.
I've got the disqualification. Yeah,
but I've only got 12 cars. Oh God.
Co-masters. Also, we're playing on the same difficulty as we do our career mode, and I was the best part of 2 seconds out in front in Q1. So something isn't right. Something isn't right. Never mind. It was too much to ask, wasn't it, to go through an entire season without like some ridiculous timing bug. So
that's true. Even if it is the Easter special. Never mind.
let's move on to Renault. Carlos Sainz made me smile. I was quite happy. I thought his qualifying pace looks good, and I think the Renault in general looks like they've got a fantastic basis for the year. I think it's a great starting point. I would have preferred that they were a bit closer to the horses in quali, but nevertheless it's fine because I think Renault have more potential to gain over the course of the year.
Yeah, I think that'll come.
Why is qualifying not finishing?
I've still got 52 seconds waiting for it to complete, as if there's someone stuck out on track. I get this sometimes.
I'm seeing there's one car out on track.
I see now. I've got quite a few. I've got people still going out. I don't even know what's going on anymore. And the guy that's done the 36-second lap has disappeared from the racetrack into the... Oh, I don't even know. Never mind.
Hell.
Good job we didn't do a proper co-op season race today, if this is what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, blessings come in all forms.
That's true. I agree with Renault. Looking really nice and pointed, and it looked like a car that you could push.
Yeah, I'm hoping to see them develop it quite well. I still think Hülkenberg and Sainz make for an exciting lineup.
Yeah.
I just hope that Sainz doesn't end up getting pulled out of Renault. I think that is a team that is good for him, and he's good for them.
Yeah, yeah.
He just, like we talked about last year when they finally let him go to Renault, and he turns up on his first session for Renault, new haircut, big smile. He just seems, and he still seems happy to be there and confident. And I think you need a young driver like that, one who believes in the project.
Chimpy says the yellow was more bearable when it was on the track. I love that livery. That's probably my favourite livery of the season.
Why are people... What is going on?
Okay, my quali has got stuck at 1 second.
Can we retire from the session? Jesus Christ.
Even my AI counterpart is now ramming other Williamses off the track. I think it's ramming myself. I'm very confused.
The disqualification was parked in a dangerous location. What a cluster. Should we come out and just do the race?
Yeah, because I'm stuck.
Yeah, let's quit to the main menu. Who was next on the grid? I forget. Well, that's just because I quit.
Yeah. Oh, so now it's got...
So we were locking each other out, I think. Let me set up just a race.
Cool, because it...
And I'll turn the difficulty up because we were miles ahead.
Cool. Who was next? McLaren were next.
Yeah, now, interested to talk about those boys. Do you want to give me your view first?
I thought that... So, in practice, they were top 10ing. In quali, they really weren't, but only just. But I was surprised that neither of them got into Q3. And that kind of took me by surprise. But then when it came to race time, they seemed to be there or thereabout. But I think this is what we constitute as this is a midfield cluster that is so close to cool, and it's going to be down to individual performance of the car, driver, and everything coming together to be at the top of that rather than being in the middle or the back of that. And Alonso kind of went into that weekend basically saying, we are slightly behind, don't panic, we're going to get there, but we're going to take pain here and in the next 2 races, and then we'll be okay. But if that was pain, that's still not terrible.
Terrible, but still
underwhelming.
I don't know. I kind of felt that. Are you sticking with the same car since we've got a chance to change? I might switch to an old McLaren because I'm feeling a bit too fast. which is an unusual feeling on the Failcast, but I'm feeling a little bit too fast. So I'm going to take the 91 McLaren.
Ooh, okay. I it's not very often I get to play. Were they talking about quali pace or race pace as Chimp? Both, I think.
I mean, I think when that statement came out, I saw it just after he made it, and you've disappeared.
Oh, I'm showing. Oh,
there we go.
I pressed
going in now?
spectate instead of race.
Oh, have you changed back?
Yeah.
Okay, then we're good. When he made that statement, I thought, okay, well, this confirms what we thought anyway, which is that just bolting a Renault in the back is not going to fix all your problems.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I felt quite happy with their pace overall. I thought, okay, fair enough, that there's definite improvement here, but part of me did wonder if they weren't going to be a bit faster, and certainly for them to, I mean, the horses blew everyone away, I think. But I was surprised by the fact that they were, behind the Renaults, behind one of the Renaults at least, and behind the horses. I agree with you, it's a good foundation, but there's something about it that still seems a little off to me, and particularly with Stoffel Van Dorn. Van Dorn, I think last year seemed very anonymous, and he still has managed to be a bit anonymous this Grand Prix, and I don't know what the boy has to do to be watchable. It was odd. I couldn't tell you anything really about his qualifying. I feel like I didn't see him.
I'm not in the Williams I selected.
What are you in?
Never mind. I'm in the 92 one. Never mind. You've not moved anywhere.
No. I have now. I don't know what happened. The car was just revving on the line.
Gotta love Cody's. So Van Dorn, I'll say more about going into the. Ooh, AI, come on. Oh, okay, AI, you do that, mate.
That move was illegal. Return the position.
What was I going to say? Yeah, so Van Dorn, I was quite happy with. There's carnage going on through there. Is that you?
No, it just happened behind me.
Okay.
So it was in my proximity, but it wasn't actually me.
Cool.
So go on, yeah, Van Dorn.
Yeah, so Van Dorn is interesting because for me, being that close to Alonso is fine, because Alonso I still think is very much on top of his game. For me, the big intrigue is less around them versus Renault at the moment, which I think is where they will start. But I would be disappointed if I was McLaren and at the end of the year I was still being talked about with McLaren versus Renault, and it should be McLaren versus Red Bull, because if you're saying that your car is supposed to be this fantastic and second best in the grid and you was being held up with a Honda engine, well, now's your chance to prove it, because the Red Bull was supposed to be the best chassis. Now you've got your direct competitor. Sort it out.
Sort it out, son.
Sort it out, son. But Van Dorn, I thought was fine, and in the race he got screwed over with the virtual safety car. So, but he was there or thereabouts with Alonso throughout practice and quali. So I was all right with him.
I'm still not entirely sure that he can step up to be the team leader. It makes me wonder if actually McLaren might not be a bad place for Danny Rick to go. But anyway. We'll talk about that when the time comes.
Yeah.
But I'm still torn on McLaren, because I agree with you that Red Bull seems like a target for them to aim for, but it does feel like a big gap to close. I agree with you. It's very odd.
You agree with
logical. No. I mean, it's odd. It's odd because normally when you set a target for a team, it's one that you should feel confident of achieving. But McLaren are kind of a special case because it's not necessarily what you feel confident they can achieve. It's more like what should they be achieving.
Yeah.
And so Red Bull becomes kind of like de facto the measuring stick for them. I just think the gap is too big. I don't think they'll close that gap over the course of the year. I think the best we can reasonably expect of them is to be 5th and 6th
Yeah.
in the race, where everyone finishes. Sorry, not 5th and 6th, sorry, 7th and 8th.
7, 8. Yeah.
Because I just don't see them. Even to the point that I would say, as good as their chassis is, I get the feeling the Red Bull is slightly better.
Yeah.
Not even slightly better. Noticeably better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. It's an interesting. It's gonna be an interesting year for McLaren in general. I didn't believe the hype, and that was the right thing to do because they haven't delivered the hype. Because there was a lot of people saying, well, they'll be getting podiums this year, and I actually don't think that will happen.
And they're still saying it.
Yeah,
which is worrying.
Yeah, but I mean, they were in denial all the way through the Honda years as well. I'd be quite willing to place a cash bet that we don't see a McLaren driver on the podium this year. I think it just requires too much to go wrong at other teams.
Yeah.
It's not even about them developing the car well, it's that it requires Red Bull to stand still. Oh, you son of a bitch. Stop ramming me!
There is some crazy ass AI out there today.
There really is. I can't get pointing back in the right direction because they keep hitting me. I'm back down to dead last.
No!
A guy like just turned in on me and slammed me into the barrier, and I bounced across the track, and then everyone hit me.
Oh.
It's fine though. I'm having fun with this car.
I tell you what has been confusing for me is obviously there's only 6 gears, and I'm used to 7 or 8 or whatever we have in our actual modern ones, and so I keep going into corners in the gear that I'm doing my old one. This doesn't work.
I've lost 26.5 seconds lap on lap thanks to that.
Nice.
Yeah, so we'll talk more about all these teams when we get onto the race review, which we really should get onto now we've lost part of qualifying.
Should we dive straight in and scoop up the rest as we go?
Yeah, we'll talk about the qualifying performances of the rest as we work through. So Vettel took the win. Kind of a surprise. Unhappy about it. It seems to me that somehow, if it's not Ferrari, it's fate finds a way to screw Kimi. Because I thought Kimi drove an excellent race. And then the virtual safety car, which I guess we'll touch on now since it's pertinent, is something I've always hated. I really dislike the virtual safety car. I think it's a stupid concept. But as you have discovered, and has been in the media as well, there is some kind of problem with the software that penalised certain cars. Still, though, you'd think in any just world it would have been Kimi that came out on top of that virtual safety car period, and he would have been the Ferrari that would come out on top. Before the race started, and after the first 10 laps or whatever, if you had to guess which Ferrari had the chance of winning, you'd say, well, it'd probably involve an accident, but Kimi. And yet somehow that smug German git managed to come out on top. And no wonder everyone was running that through their calculators. Still, though, I'm kind of glad that the first win went to someone other than Mercedes, because I have no confidence that the rest won't all just go to the silver cars.
Yeah, I'm glad. So I'm glad that Hamilton didn't win for that very reason, in that he came off the back of a season where the back end of it, the back third, was all about him. And then to come in and it's all the hype of, oh, we're going to have 3 teams up the front now, it's all going to be good. The last thing anyone wants for a headline is Hamilton wins again. So I didn't mind who won as long as it wasn't him.
I think what it showed as well, I mean, Bottas displayed it best, I think, is that is a car designed to lead, which is the kind of car they've made in the past as well. It doesn't look quite so happy behind other cars. But also there is we'll get onto the overtaking issue in due course, but there is clearly an issue regarding overtaking in this formula. Anywho, I think it was interesting because we might not get a chance elsewhere in the season to see that car trying to follow another car, and it does look like it's a car designed to lead, which when you've got that power unit is a sensible assumption to make.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Can I just say though, how lollable it was to have Hamilton up behind Vettel and then go, oh, I'm going to boost it, yo, and then absolutely cock it up. And then wasn't he very quiet afterwards? And I thought, good, you smug little shit. Because you're right, it was a battle of the smugs. So you're either going to get the smug finger or the smug blessed. And so no wonder we're all going, come on, Kimi. But I think Kimi will hopefully have his day a little bit later on. Even if they need to do a switch around to gift him a win, to say, I'm so sorry we put you through years of shit, mate.
Yeah, provided that Kimi keeps his foot on the pedal the way he started the season. But the other interesting thing was, did you notice how after the race Hamilton seemed to get into his own head? Because I watched that race and I saw him pull into the pit garage where they do Parc Fermé now. And did you see him sit in the car like super dejectedly?
Yeah.
And then he was already whinging into the radio, like, how did that happen? What happened, guys? And I was thinking, you have the dominant car. It's the first race of the season, and you've come second. It's not the end of the world, mate. But he looked genuinely put out by it. Like, genuinely upset and disturbed. Like, oh, this is a fucking disaster. And I thought, well, if we're going to have an interesting season, I suppose you're going to need to have him have one of his occasional nervous breakdowns. Because when he's in that mindset, as we've discussed for many years, he drives like shite.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the tell was, really. Whether it was him binning it, well, not binning it, but messing up his attempted overtake, which we've seen in the past as well. I mean, Silverstone, the year before last, is the one that will forever stick in my memory, because he lost ground to the Williams off the line, and then for the rest of the Grand Prix, he just looked shoddy. And I got the same feeling here. Like, yeah, he put in a lot of fastest laps, but he looked desperate, and I don't know why you would be desperate.
Yeah. It's almost like he's decided #blessed will see him through for the win, and that he's already got the predetermined fate, and then as soon as something kind of throws him off his course, he doesn't quite know what to do with it. And it was interesting on the radio of what's up guys, blah 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 blah, and then it was what did I do, which was quite, I didn't understand that reference to because you're under virtual safety car, you can't do anything but drive to that predetermined speed, whether we like it or not. So I didn't understand the reference to and the only thing that can make me think of that was he pootling along, not going to the slight amount of speed that he ever should have done, either before a virtual safety car, if they're sitting there going, oh yeah, you need to have this out. I don't think that really goes on in strategies where they're like, you need to have X amount of seconds over everyone because of virtual safety car. But if he basically was cruising around and not pushing to his limit, and then lost the race for that, then I can understand why he would be pissed off. But then...
But I don't get the impression that's what happened. I don't know. When I heard that comment, I took it as him trying to... And maybe this is unfair on Lewis, but I took that as him trying to make a point that he didn't do anything wrong, it's down to the team. Like he was trying to, not accuse them necessarily, but to say, well, what did I do? And, when they say nothing, mate, then he's like, well, then it's you fuckers. But I hear, I haven't heard anything definitively on this, because there are some people in the sport and in media who have said, well, given when the virtual safety car happened, it was a mathematical certainty that Lewis would come out second from that exchange. And I haven't got my calculator out and looked at the lap times and so on to know if that statement is definitively true. But there's sort of two schools of thought on this. I mean, the general consensus has been there is something wrong with the software. Fine. I'm quite happy to concede that. But there is a school of thought saying, well, even with the bug in the software, it was always going to be the case that if a virtual safety car appeared at that precise moment, Lewis wouldn't make up the ground. So I don't really know.
I find the bug in the software to be immaterial, because it doesn't matter if the software goes you're ahead or you're behind. It's the time that matters anyway. So yeah, pointless.
Continuing down, we have Danny Rick coming in fourth. I was kind of torn because I felt like Kimi had the short shrift a little bit during that race, so I kind of wanted to see him do well, but at the same time I really wanted Ricciardo on the podium at his home Grand Prix.
No, I agree. I could have quite happily booted off either one of the top two and got them both on there. But never mind. Alas,
it was not to be. But I thought, he had a very strong drive, and I think he was another person who demonstrated that it seems very difficult to overtake.
But at least
and whether that was
you got a couple in.
Yeah, but I mean, he clearly had the pace on Kimi. In the latter stints and the latter stages of the final stint, but couldn't seem to do anything with that. And I felt up and down the grid. And normally I'm not so quick to complain about overtaking or whatever, but the situation with the horses in particular gave me pause for thought. But we'll get onto that when we talk about Haas. I thought Danny Rick drove a pretty strong race. I think Red Bull should be happy with the result, at least from that side of the garage. I don't think they could realistically have hoped for much better.
No.
Just that, I mean, because at the end of the race, I remember hearing Crofty talking about, well, it looks like a three-way fight for the championship. I was like, it really doesn't, Crofty. I don't know what race you've been watching, mate. It looks like a one-way fight, to be honest. The only thing I could see happening is the drivers going to Mercedes and the constructors going to Ferrari.
Yeah, and that's interesting because if you have a Kimi that's on point, and I think we were saying this last year, it's as much about which is the best number two to work out who's going to be the constructor. And judging off that specific race, at the minute, it looks like Ferrari have got the better number two for the moment. Obviously, long way to go.
The irony, though, is that is the championship that Ferrari cares least about.
Yeah.
They may end up winning the constructors, and they actually don't particularly want it. So, yeah, strange. But also, I could see Red Bull putting up a challenge just over the course of the season, I suppose. But again, it's kind of like with McLaren challenging Red Bull. It's something that could happen, but I think it requires a little bit too much to happen for it to be a realistic possibility.
Can we talk about Max Verstappen getting frustrated in that race?
Yes. This I was ready for this. Please give me your views.
I don't know if that's symptomatic of him regressing slightly with a slightly more wobbly car in a wobbly format, in a halo he doesn't like, not being able to overtake and push in a car, and letting it get the better of him. Or if it was just... Well, I don't really know. I was going to start mentioning tyres, but tyres weren't really a massive issue for a lot of people, so who knows?
No, I was actually a bit disappointed about how the tyre life panned out, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, it produced some interesting statistics, which we'll talk about if we get time, but... well, disappointed is the wrong word, but I was surprised by what happened with the tyres. Anyway, back on the topic. I thought Max looked one of the worst on corner exit. I thought he looked really scrappy. And I don't know if I can lay all that necessarily on him or whether it's a car issue, but Ricardo looked better. I think I liked your choice of word regress, because last year we were talking about the fact that I was impressed with him towards the end of the year. I thought my complaint with him had always been that he hadn't matured necessarily or got the race distance racecraft to be able to sit back and say, well, it will come to me, I don't have to win it right now. And it seemed that all that progress he made last year has gone completely out of the window once the flag dropped. And I think part of it was the Haas's frustrating him. I was going to talk about the Haas's race pace later on, but the reason I was saying that I think the Haas is a qualifier's car rather than a race car is that they held those positions because it's difficult to overtake. They were a second a lap, roughly, off the Ferraris, which the gap wasn't that big in qualifying. So on race pace, they are not within the half second of Ferrari that they targeted, but in qualifying, they were about there or thereabouts. So they were undoubtedly holding up at least the Red Bulls, if not the Renaults. And it seemed to me like Grosjean and Magnussen, I think, did a fantastic job, and they held their positions and did what they had to do. Ultimately, they were let down, of course, by bad fortune or whatever. But it seems to me that on pace alone, those cars weren't running there, like actually on merit of pace. And I think that Max wouldn't necessarily have minded that if he could have overtaken, but let's talk about overtaking as a side issue, right? Ross Brawn has said that they've identified a problem with overtaking this year, and we talked about this before we went live with the episode, because you and I both hate reactionary takes in Formula One. Like, don't judge anything off a single race. But as I was saying to you before we went live, I feel a bit different about it if someone like Ross Brawn is looking at it and saying, okay, this isn't fucking right. I don't feel that I can confidently say what's wrong.
Halo.
That's part of it.
I do wonder, though, if it is the halo and the way how that then changes the aerodynamics of something and the wash of it, and then what they do to make that better, and then because it's wide already and the cars are faster, therefore less braking distance, it just makes for a very difficult train. Maybe that could be it. I don't know. I mean, the only thing I can say about the Halo so far is that all people who were saying, well, after 5 laps you won't notice it, they were talking out of their arse. I was all right off board. It was on board that made me cry.
Yes, yeah. But even off board, to be honest with you, it was irritating me a bit, more than I thought it would. I came into the 2014 season saying the dildo nose would drive me mental, and actually it didn't. Like, I stopped noticing it after a while. And the hybrid engines, people were complaining about the noise, and I agreed at the time, well, you know what, you won't even notice it once the racing starts. And I stand by that. I think you can still get great races in the hybrid era, and it doesn't, like, the lack of noise it's not great, but it doesn't irritate me. But the halo actually does irritate me in a way that I didn't think that it would. Whether it's the cause of the disruption, I don't know. It could be. I mean, it's a good hypothesis because we're seeing cars up and down the grid having this seeming lack of downforce on corner exit. I know a lot of them have put aerodynamic devices onto the halo, which you think is quite high up the car, actually. So maybe it's a balance thing. Maybe they're struggling to find car balance now the halo is there. Whatever it is, whether it's just a contributing factor or the deciding factor in why it's so hard to overtake, there clearly is something different this year that's making it harder to follow and harder to overtake. And apparently it's so serious that after only one race, Ross Brawn feels the need to address it.
I wonder what you could actually do. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I agree. I have no idea what he's going to propose, but I would say it's good that it's at least being looked at. Whether it changes anything or even helps, I don't know, but I'm open to it as an idea. Oh god, I'm being held in the pits now for like 13 seconds. God damn it.
Oh, we pitted on the same lap. Oh, we're not in the same team. Sorry, I'm so used to I was like, wow, good job we weren't in the Haas's, because otherwise there would have been massive problems. Watch out for the wheel guns! Sorry.
Oh, I've really lost on that pit stop. I was up to 3rd and now I'm down in 11th. I'm having fun, actually, overtaking. Yeah. Keep waffling here. Whatever it was, once he lost ground to those Haas's, you could tell that he was very, very frustrated. The spin was interesting. He blamed it on damage. I'm
where?
not sure.
I wonder.
I'm not sure I'm prepared to let him off that easily. Actually, I don't know what chat thinks, but I sort of thought he looked scrappy anyway, and once he's in that mood where, you know, he's hyper competitive, I could see him over revving it.
Especially as that's into the DRS zone, isn't it? Which is the best of the overtaking options down into turn 3. So take a few extra kph through, try and see if you can prey on a Haas, DRS, dive bomb, up against Mr. Dive Bomb K-Mags himself. So yeah, I for me, for Verstappen, particularly being stuck behind K-Mags, it was like getting a taste of your own medicine in a way, and not liking things done to him. Yeah, interesting. But it was the lack of the tyre thing as well. Once that was all done, he just didn't seem to recover from it, and that's also what I mean by regressing, because you get your head back in the game then, but he didn't.
Yeah. No, he didn't, but that's also part of what makes me think that it actually is incredibly hard to follow in these cars, because you'd think if anyone's going to have another crack at it, it would be Max. So it was a little odd to see him kind of get stuck somewhat. He also had that incident with Alonso, where he accelerated where he shouldn't have done to race someone on pit exit. What was your take on that? I mean, he surrendered the position, so obviously Red Bull thought that he'd overstepped the mark, but what was your take?
I didn't realise that he'd accelerated. That's the first I've heard of that. I just thought that they came out side by side and he went for the position and just was like, wah, wah, wah. But if he accelerated, to me, that's a penalty.
Yeah, you'd think so, but I think that's why they surrendered the position, because they thought they were going to get a penalty.
Okay.
Because normally Red Bull, if they're even half confident that they've not done anything wrong, they'll hold position. But for them, because I refuse to think that Max gave the position back of his own volition. I just wouldn't credit him with that.
And you could see Alonso was like, no, I'm not giving the position back because I'd rather you get the penalty. I thought that was quite funny. He's got his arm out the window.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. When I saw it happen, actually, I thought, okay, that looks to me unacceptable. But then again, that could just be because I always assume malice on the part of Verstappen. I just do. I just automatically assume that he's like trying to snatch the advantage. So maybe I'm a little biased there. Maybe revealing my biases a little bit, but I thought it was the right thing to do to give that position back.
Yeah.
McLaren, strong finishes in general. I thought Alonso looked pretty good over the course of the race.
Yep. Bit feisty. I liked his fighting spirit with his engineer on the team radio, which is after spending a year basically tormenting them the other way round. Now to see him basically saying, "Come on, give me energy," I thought was quite funny.
It actually gives me, again, don't want to judge off only one race, but it gives me a little bit of hope that even though I still believe we won't see a McLaren on the podium this year, the way Alonso was post-race gave me a little bit of hope that actually he might stick around, because he seemed to have genuinely enjoyed himself. Whether finishing, 5th, 6th, 7th over the course of the year is going to be enough to keep him feeling that way, I would argue probably not. Because as you and I said last year, what will probably happen is they'll see an improvement at the start of the year that will keep him happy, and then he'll develop a new problem. Watching the Red Bulls ride off into the distance, he'll get frustrated because of that.
Yeah.
I think after 3 years of being way down the grid, being in a position to fight in the points like that easily, of course he's going to come out of it happy. But still, I'm trying to take positives away from it. And although it's probably not where McLaren hoped to be, it's certainly a good starting point. I think the midfield being so tight together, I don't think any team can take it as read where they're going to come out by the end of the season. I don't think you can have much confidence in your development programs at all at this point.
No.
So I'm finding, I'm finding it really hard to predict how the season's going to develop, to be honest. I actually thought Force India would improve between testing and round one, because we know they weren't running global on spec at all in testing, but it seems that actually they haven't found any pace whatsoever. So it's really hard to call in general, but McLaren, I'm still finding the team hardest to actually assess. Any further words on McLaren?
No, I think it's just a great base for them, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go once they come away from the immediate flyaway races. I think that's when we'll start to see their development train hopefully really come into its own.
Yeah, I mean, this is a chance for them to show that they can still develop a car. Because even though they've not been winning championships for a very long time now, they've always shown an ability to develop a bad car, and I guess this is a chance to show that again. It'd be a Herculean effort to get up with the Red Bulls, but yeah, I agree. Positive start all in all. I still don't think it's all that in a bag of chips. I still don't have vast reserves of confidence, but it certainly wasn't a bad start. And I'm prepared to say the car actually looks better on track than I thought in terms of livery.
I like it, so I'm easily swayed.
I still think it looks far too sparse and bare, but it looks better than it looked to me at the pre-season, so that's something. Was it Renault next down the road?
Yeah, it would be.
Yeah. Again, Carlos Sainz was the interesting one for me, not least because he managed to take the final points paying position while suffering from extreme nausea. He had a fault develop with the pump on his drink system, so it was constantly unloading water into his mouth, and he was having to just drink and drink and drink.
He said in the, I think it was in the, I don't know if it's Ted Notebook or the Will Buxton thing. He drunk so much that he ended up under the safety car just throwing up loads to try and get it all back out again.
Yeah.
Nice. And that's the first time I think we've had an in-car vomit since Mark Webber in Fuji.
Yes. It's it probably is. That's a nice statistic you've wheeled out there.
That is.
I believe I believe very strongly though that shows what he's made of.
Yeah.
That I mean, we saw him go off at the end of the race, which you would if you were feeling that way. But the fact that he managed to keep it together and take that point, I think that shows that he is
Good result.
to be very highly rated. I also thought Hulkenberg drove a great race as well.
Yeah, because I'm super intrigued to see how this inter-team battle goes. And what I'm hoping is that Hulkenberg is able to show what he has now that he has a car that is good for Q3 at all times, instead of him having to be the person that pokes it through, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, super excited, and I'm glad that he's got off to a good start. And I hope that maintains, because sometimes I kind of think midpoint of the season he kind of snoozes a little bit and then pops back at the end. So he'll need to keep himself on his toes, because that Spaniard will not be wanting to snooze himself.
But that's why I think they're such good teammates, because I think they keep themselves honest. When he had Palmer on the other side of the garage, even though he said it wasn't the case, and some of his qualifying performances would say it wasn't the case, it still seemed like he had that luxury of knowing that he probably had the best part of a second in his back pocket over his teammate, and so, he was always going to come out the golden boy, whereas now he has to be on it because Sainz is there to pip him in qualifying or snatch an extra few points. I think Renault have done very well to get those two drivers. I think it's an excellent mix of youth and experience, and I think it's a great opportunity for both of them. I think Renault will come good, very good, in the next few years, and hopefully Hulkenberg can hold on to his drive long enough to get on the podium, and who knows, maybe even pick up a cheeky race win after the formula change. Because as far as I can see, that if performance stays where it is or improves, they've got no reason to replace either driver. So good on them, good on them. I'm super happy. And double points finish, which I think is so vital for a team like that.
Yeah, agreed.
There was no moral argument for holding on to Palmer on that basis. We've covered all the point scoring cars now, have we not? So doesn't this bring us now to Force India?
Force India, yeah. And I think for me, as I go off into the gravel, they were my second most disappointing thing of the weekend, because yes, in testing they had kind of said, oh well, we're a bit behind and we'll catch up with our actual 2018 car. What actually arrived in Melbourne was not much of a difference between what they bought last year and this year, and they've been saying about cash flow, but actually there seems to be more sponsorship on the car, so I can't quite tell if they've just then lowered their sponsorship rate and then plastered that the magnesium water all over the car for the hope of looking better and looking more attractive than what they are. I don't really know, but it surprises me that now is the pinch. After what was a great season, they've got more championship money, they've brought in some big sponsors, or seemingly newer big sponsors, I guess. I didn't expect the cash pinch to come now. And what a horrible time for the cash pinch to come when everyone else has stepped up. So yeah, I'm genuinely worried for where that comes. But the car I didn't see much of it actually on track.
No, they didn't get much airtime.
No, so I don't have much of an opinion as to whether it looked difficult to drive or just slow. Did you have an opinion?
Yeah, from what I saw of it, because I was playing around in the F1 app and you can hop between cars. It looked fairly stable compared to some of the other cars. It just looked off the pace. And to be honest with you, though, if you look at the reviews people like Gary Anderson have done, it's not necessarily that they've lost pace, it's that they've sort of treaded water and everyone else has stepped up. It's the same with Ferrari. It's not that Ferrari have built a worse car than last year, it's that they've built a car that's almost identical to last year.
Yeah.
And everyone else has made gains. So, I don't know. I'd be interested to see if Force India can develop the way out of this, but I agree with you, it's a very strange time for this to happen. Especially given that they're on the back of 2 fourth-place constructors' finishes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a car that is very healthily sponsored. I mean, the argument that, the safety car. The argument that they've been making that, well, we need... fucking virtual safety car. We need to change the name because we're not very sponsor-tastic. That's ringing a bit hollow for me because I haven't seen a team as healthily sponsored as them in quite some time.
Yeah,
I mean, they've got more sponsors than McLaren and Ferrari combined.
Yeah. Now, I don't know quite what they give as their sponsorship threshold, but to me, when you look at BWT last year to this year, there's more of it on the car, and you'd think, well, your stock level raised because you had an amazing 2017. Are they not pumping more money in? What's happened there? And in a downturn in performance, that does not bode well for Vijay Mallya being able to pop out and go, hey everyone, I've made lots of money with my team. When they're trying to float themselves for a sale, it's probably the worst time ever that it could have happened.
I don't actually think they are trying to sell, to be honest with you. I thought that Rich... Let's talk about that very quickly. We only got a few laps left and there's lots still to cover, but I always thought that was either not going to happen, and it was just all bullshit, or it was something that would kill the team. I don't think they're going to sell out. I think they will rebrand and carry on. That's just my assessment.
I hope so.
But yeah, no, the Rich Energy deal, it just smelled off to me. It's not that I believed it was impossible. It was just that it was an incredibly stupid thing to do. For both sides, to be honest. So yeah, glad that hasn't happened. Apparently, there's still a chance they'll change the name next year, but they're committed to Force India for this year, so we'll see. I just was disappointed, generally. They've got such a great lineup that I really wanted to see them be able to not necessarily hold on to fourth. I thought that was probably a bit ambitious, but I did want to see them do well just because of the talent they've got behind the wheel.
Yeah.
I think if they don't improve over the course of the year, they're going to have a very hard job holding on to Perez.
Yeah, and actually, I thought it was quite interesting that there was a noticeable good 4 tenths of a second gap between Perez and Ocon all weekend, which I remember Ocon wasn't particularly speedy round here this time last year either, but I was thinking the second time round he might be bang on it. But there was a bit of a gap. Because Perez has been doing 1-year deals, hasn't he? Forever sniffing around for getting back up the grid again. And that
it's
makes
a good year to be on the market as well.
It's a great year to be on the market, especially when Force India are not looking like the car that you would want to stay in.
No. So. It's going to be very interesting to see how that develops. Next down the road, surprising a lot of people, but not me actually, Charles Leclerc in the Sauber.
Yay!
That made me super happy, but not as happy as the Merrickson banging in that amazing lap in qualifying.
Oh yeah, our Twitters were alight with that. That was good. I was really pleased.
I can't remember being as happy as watching his name pop up in 12th out of nowhere. I was like, yes, Lord, yes.
Because that car looked shaky all the way through practice, and I was unsurprised but mildly disappointed at the same time, because I thought, I'll just cling on to the back. You'll be fine, Sauber. But actually, they're right in there, and their race pace seemed to be a little bit better. Both got off the line quite well. Ericsson overtook a couple of people around the first lap and said that he was busy lining up Stroll, or had just got past Stroll, I can't remember, when the car conked. And then Leclerc got past Stroll after the safety car went in. So, yeah, good stuff. And it makes me think 8th, 9th, potentially best car in a race trim. And a couple of races with a bit of a weird attrition, and they could be right with it for a point or two.
Well, what I found was that they brought an upgrade to Melbourne that I wasn't expecting.
Oh.
I don't know if you've seen it,
No.
but they've done some aerodynamic stuff on the suspension wishbones,
Right.
and it's actually quite advanced stuff. And I saw it and I thought, that's interesting. And then I read a technical review of it in one of the magazines. It might have been Autosport or Motorsport.com. And there people were saying, like, this is the money coming in, because this is something that takes some development. It's one of those, like, very positive symptoms that we hope to see after this deal was concluded. That here they are innovating again rather than just treading water. So I thought this was a very encouraging start to the year for Sauber. Yeah, definitely. They looked off the pace in qualifying, but they do seem to have a car that performs better in race trim.
Yeah.
And
where it's a whole new
Renault
car as well, it's like you've got to get used to knowing what that car does, and that takes time.
Yeah, precisely. But I can see them moving forward throughout the year. So sad for Ericsson, but pleased by Leclerc's performance, because it was on merit as well. It wasn't all attrition. Like, he passed cars in racing conditions, so it's not like Sauber looked into 13th position there.
No.
If you can look into 13th position, that is a thing. So yeah, I feel positive about Sauber. I'm happy to see that happen. Delighted, in fact. Next up, Williams. Very disappointing.
They are my disappointment of the race, collectively as a team. I don't think you can really chuck too much at Sirotkin, because sorry, it made me go weird, and then the car went through me.
We might actually have a race on our hands, you and me, once the safety car's in. That's a good way to finish the episode.
It is. I don't know if I'll be able to talk much, but yeah.
Oh, backing us up there, you cheeky monkey.
It's not letting me do anything different. It won't let me go above 90 kph.
Oh. Cody's.
And it still won't. Now it will. Yeah, I was really disappointed with Williams. Stroll looked just poor. Sirotkin looked mediocre, but all you could really do in your first race. Drop was last all the way, but I think he was having some kind of problem from the beginning. And then bit of a rubbish way to end your Grand Prix debut with a paper bag, or a plastic
paper bag in your brake duct.
Yeah,
not a great start.
No.
He seemed quite unhappy as well afterwards, I thought. But Stroll as well, actually. Stroll spoke to Autosport after the Grand Prix and said, Williams are surviving, not racing. And I was thinking, that's a fucking dangerous thing for you to be talking about, since you're the fucking reason people are saying it.
Yeah.
It's one of those, like McLaren talking, Red Bull talking about Renault. You think now is the time to hold your tongue if you were going to hold your tongue ever.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's not really much more I can say about Williams. It was just disappointing. It's just
disappointing and anonymous.
Yeah.
And I can't see where their gains are going to come from, which is what my worry is. We've talked to every other team, and there's something good to say, but I can't say anything good or positive about where I think Williams will go to next. I mean, yes, you've got Paddy Lowe bringing in whatever it is that they can bring in, but I'd have hoped that would have made itself quite known at the beginning of the season with a good car, and that's clearly not the case. So we'll see.
No. And so to finish out the episode, let's talk Toro Rosso. A lot slower than perhaps some people were expecting, but I still want to say I don't think we've actually seen the potential of Toro Rosso Honda yet.
No, I think there's more potential there. I was disappointed that there was a Honda going pop. I really hoped that was not going to be the case. Just for one race, plus. And that was a shame. Disappointing for Gasly to chuck it off in quali. Made it a bit better in the race. I still am not entirely sure on their driver lineup, but I don't think it's anything that we could ever resolve until we work out what that Honda unit is capable of.
No, true. I mean, Hartley's always been a bit of an odd one for me anyway. Like, I like Brendan Hartley, but it's clear he's there because they literally had nobody else, and that makes me sad.
Yeah. Have you read what Jean-Eric Vergne said about them?
No.
Oh, Jean-Eric Vergne.
Give me the wisdom of the Jev.
So I was watching a really, really interesting interview with him on motorsport.com, and it was he basically said Hartley's call-up has made me laugh, and he said it's the most humiliating and hilarious thing that they've ever had to do in a Red Bull development program, because they've basically thrown away so many good prospects that he's like the only one who's still quite happy to be associated with them. And during the interview, he was also saying about when obviously he was up against Ricciardo and he outscored him, and each year and beforehand with Kvyat and so on. It was after with Kvyat. He was basically saying, my face did not fit, and it didn't matter if I beat people, my face didn't fit because I was miserable and I wasn't happy for being there. I came in and expected that we'd all be fighting for, not for wins, but he said he finished 8th on his debut, I think it was, and he came in and was like, well, we only came 8th, as opposed to Ricciardo coming in and going, we scored a point, and being happy. And instantly it just turned everyone against him. And he said if he'd have had his time again, he would have learned to be happy. Because that's what he says he's now found being in Formula E, is that actually, because it's such a tight, nice field where cars are relatively the same and all of that kind of stuff, you take the good times because they are good times and you know you've earned them. Whereas he didn't understand that a good time for Toro Rosso was going to be 8th.
No.
And I just found it really, really interesting about the way how he went about things. But he went into quite detail about how he feels very sorry for Brendan Hartley and thinks that it makes it quite laughable that Red Bull's driver program have got this ginormous gap because they've either chucked people on the scrap heap too early or pinned all their hopes on the faces that may not necessarily always be the fastest people.
Yeah, it's just... I agree with you. You'd have to work a miracle to build a career in Formula One now. It's just like he's keeping the seat warm until they have a young driver to stick in there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's going to be a good move for his career. He's a multiple champion with Porsche. I understand that maybe he wants the experience of having that run in F1, but ultimately I think it probably does more damage to him than good. Yeah. Now, talking about Toro Rosso generally, though, when I say I don't think we've seen their potential yet, I think it really is that the work Honda have done on the power unit has been so reliability focused. That it's been about building that foundation where the engine isn't blowing up all the time. And to be fair, they made it to qualifying and practice and all the testing without issue. It was a shame to see a unit go pop in the race, but it will happen from time to time. I think they were just looking to build a foundation from which they can develop. And overall, I am a lot more positive about Honda now they're tied to Toro Rosso than I was about them being tied to McLaren, because Toro Rosso will give them the leeway that they need to build the engine as they see fit, rather than building an engine that fits into a very aggressive aero design. But perhaps compromises in terms of reliability. I mean, that's what Honda was saying in the preseason as well, that, well, we could always build an engine that would run. The problem was McLaren was very aggressive on the packaging and wouldn't compromise. So we were, I believe all they wanted to do was add a few centimetres on the length of the engine. And they said that would guarantee reliability, but McLaren would not let them do it. So having a partner like Toro Rosso, I think there is potential there. I don't think they'll be at the back all year. I think, bizarrely and somewhat sadly, we're going to end up seeing Williams be the ones that are propping up the grid.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree.
That's kind of heartbreaking. Although when I say that, I think I'm thinking of 1990s Williams rather than the team that has been boring us for 15 years now. Say for that little run in 2014. Because we had this conversation last year. I can't think of a team that is more... do you know? Like, the Martini livery and branding looked really good in 2014, and since then it's just sort of like, whatever, mate. And then they have, for almost 2 decades, had that bizarre behaviour when picking drivers. Like, the one I always go through is Barrichello. You think, okay, the team's going in a new direction. We need a fresh young talent. Get me that hot, thrusting young buck, Rubens Barrichello. A man who was born in his 40s. It just seemed odd. And I actually thought we'd end up seeing Di Resta in the Williams this year.
Yeah, I was worried.
And I thought you just could not make a more uninspired and boring choice.
But it would have suited them as well at the same time.
That's the problem. It suits them. So I'm kind of disappointed, but also not, and I'm quite ambivalent about where Williams are. I wouldn't want to see them go out of business and collapse and never recover, but I don't feel as bad for them being at the back as I did about Sauber, for example.
No, and interesting. I think with Williams, there's an insidious nature that's running through the whole thing. Talking to other people in Formula One, so there's a couple of job positions that came up at Williams that I was thinking of applying for. So I was speaking to some people that do jobs that are related to that in other teams, and they've said, "Oh, that job comes up for Williams every 4 months because no one can stick it." And I was like, "Why is that?" And they went, "We don't know, but it's now known in Formula One as like the poison pit." And I was like, interesting to know.
That's a hot insider take you've pulled out of your arse there. Why are you keeping that in your pocket? We should have opened with that.
I save them for the end so that our loyal viewers, such as Mr. Chimpy and Elias and people like that, get to enjoy it.
Yeah, but Joe, my only disappointment about this episode is that we had all those bugs in qualifying. Hopefully that didn't ruin it for anybody, but otherwise I think that's a nice, concise rundown of racing qualifying. I think a lot to look forward to for the season. A lot to lament and feel a little disappointed with. I think we were all hoping for the gap at the front to be a little narrower. It'd be interesting to see as the season goes on what Ross Brawn does about the overtaking problem, if anything at all, because obviously he needs unanimity, and whether party mode gets banned on the Mercedes. I think that also will be a big factor as to whether the season remains particularly watchable. I'm absolutely sure that once Lewis put in that pole lap 6/10 clear of everybody else, that in that moment a good chunk of the audience just decided I'm not going to bother with the race. I even debated getting up for it, to be honest with you, and I host a podcast that requires me to watch it so I can talk about it, and even I was like, is it really worth me getting out of bed? I can just imagine the headlines, and part of me even thought I could see Vettel coming out with the win. I I didn't know how it would happen, but I thought it'll either be Vettel or it'll be Hamilton, and lo and behold, it was. So here's hoping that the midfield, which looks to be quite spicy, can provide us entertainment for the rest of the year, because I don't think we can necessarily rely on the sharp end of the grid to do the job.
I agree. Good summary. Good summary.
Points for Sauber players.
Yes, plus. Predictions for Bahrain? Same. Yeah.
Predictions for Bahrain. I think we'll see a Mercedes win. Almost inevitable.
Yep. Agreed.
I think we might see Kimi come out ahead of Vettel. Bottas, I'm finding hard to call because I don't think his performance in Australia was reflective of his actual pace in the car. I think it's reflective of the sign that it's very hard to overtake at the moment. So I actually think you might get a Mercedes 1-2, and then Kimi rounding out the podium. I think Max will beat Ricciardo, assuming both finish and there's no penalties. And I think Renault at least, will come out ahead of the McLarens. Haas, I'm finding it hard to say, but presumably they'll be mixing it between the Renault-powered cars, so somewhere in amongst the Red Bulls and the McLarens and whatnot. If I had to make like a outward call, I'd say that maybe you might see Checo pick up a point if there's enough attrition. But that's about the only surprise I could see. I don't think Sauber are quite there yet for picking up a point. I think they will pick up some points during the season, probably during high attrition races, but I think they'll do it. What about you? What's your projection?
I think we're going to see a Mercedes win. I agree. I think Kimi will outdo Vettel. Whether or not he'll be allowed to finish that way is another matter. But Kimi's always gone well around Bahrain. I don't know which Red Bull will be out on top. I think Haas will then be the fourth best team still. Traditionally, they've gone quite well in Bahrain.
That's true.
And it's a Ferrari power unit versus a Renault power unit, so I'm thinking a minor advantage there as well. So I think that will be it. It'll be interesting to see if K-Mags outdoes Grosjean again. Because Grosjean was all being a bit bitchy post race, saying, "Oh, I had the pace to go faster, but my cookbook was awaiting." So yeah,
it's the balls in his mouth as well, probably.
Nice. So I think they'll be next, followed by a toss-up between McLarens and Renaults. Maybe a Force India's getting stuck in there with Perez for a point. I agree with that, actually, to be fair. And I'm hoping to see a little bit better from Williams. I think Sorokin will out-qualify Stroll, and I would like to see the Saubers will out-qualify the Toro Rossos.
That is a bold statement. It wouldn't totally surprise me, but I don't share your confidence. I think actually we might see Toro Rosso have them in qualifying, but maybe lose out to them in the race. That'll be my feeling. I'm gonna go out though and say that Merrickson will out-qualify Leclerc again.
No.
I don't think that'll be the way it goes across the season, but I think it will happen. I think he's still finding his feet, Leclerc.
Yeah. Cool.
So yeah, we are back in 2 weeks following the Bahrain Grand Prix, where we will presumably pick up our career mode again and be back in the Haas's, and hopefully for a far less buggy quality and race. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Hope you enjoyed the break from the norm that Easter afforded us. I was a bit disappointed that we didn't get to have our little race at the end there, but you just have way too much pace. I've just been looking at your lap times, and your final lap was the best part of 2 seconds faster than anything you've done the whole Grand Prix. So I must have put a bit of fire under your arse a little bit there, mate.
A little bit. Mix free all the way. No, pleasure as always. Pleasure as always. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Don't forget, you've got your Bahrain. And if you watch other motorsport, BTCC kicks off next weekend as well. So I should be enjoying some tin top loving. You guys will take care. And from the best of both of us, go get diabetes with your Easter eggs. Nom nom!
Bye. Love you. Bye.
Love you.